Remember, you cannot polish a turd. Hello and welcome to this week's fretboard session. Today we're going to look at how you can get a good tone out of your guitar, and we're going to do that by giving you the tools to really do it with any guitar or amp that you've got in front of you. We're going to look at how you can actually decide and set things up so that you can actually get a good sound, the sound that you like, not the same sound that I like or anyone else likes, and really where you should be moving from. I think tone is one of those things that it's easy once you know the fundamentals to get a decent sound on the guitar, but you'll forever be refining what that means to you. And there's a lot of cloudy mess all over the internet about how to get this specific tone and how to do something that's quite advanced. And so what I want to give you today is the tools in order to make the best decisions for your tone on your instrument. So the reason I'm making this video, and a word of warning, is I get a lot of students ask me about buying a new guitar, a new pedal, a new amp, effects units, all that stuff. And I think all those things are great. I love effects units and I love buying new guitars and I love amps. But often it's not going to get the result that they want. What they want is a certain tone of an artist they like, or they want this kind of majestic sound. They're trying to solve a problem, but we can fix a lot of that problem immediately, normally with the equipment you have. So, having a good set of strings on, really important, and then understanding the basics of how the tone works on a guitar and an amp can make a huge difference, because remember, you cannot polish a turd. Now, why is tone even relevant to fretboard sessions? Well, first of all, I think that if you don't like the sound of the guitar that's just coming out of it, you're less likely to play the guitar, and it's harder for you to know whether what you're playing sounds bad because of how you're actually playing it on the fretboard, or whether it sounds bad because your tone just sounds bad anyway. And I think often when you're learning on the guitar, you can just assume that everything should sound bad, and that doesn't help you in refining your own playing and listening to your own playing and trying to make it sound better. So if you can start out with a decent sounding tone, it will help everything in terms of your practice, I think. So the first thing I want to say is, do your fingers and how you play make a huge difference for tone on the guitar? For the sake of this lesson, I'm going to say no. Now, that doesn't mean that someone who's a great guitar player can't make any guitar sound good, because they pretty much can. Someone who's really good can pick up any old chunk of wood and make it sound good. But part of that is they know where to have the amp set up, and they know how to fiddle around and find the best tone for the instrument they're on. And then also their playing sounds great. But you're always looking to put yourself on a platform, the tone, that will actually make your playing sound as good as possible. And that's probably the first thing you'll see anyone pick up a guitar do, is they play a chord and they start, if they're any good, they start messing around with these knobs because they're looking for something bearable. There are certain tips and tricks on the physical side that you can do to make certain things sound better. Most of it is either going to be on the guitar already, or it's out of your control. Now, first tip I'm going to recommend for your guitar to sound better immediately and have better tone is change your strings. If you haven't changed your strings in a year, change your strings. If you haven't changed your strings in 6 months, change your strings. If you haven't changed your strings in 3 months and you play quite a lot, like you're playing 3, 4, 5 times a week, maybe daily, change your strings. Unless you're using elixirs, which last a little bit longer, I'd say 6 months, but change your strings makes such a big difference. If you're looking at getting a new guitar, before you buy a new guitar, change your strings, because you might fall in love with your old guitar. And even change your strings and get a setup, because sometimes you can buy £2,000 guitars or £1,000 guitars or £200 guitars or £100 guitars, and at the beginning you love it, and you might change your strings and go, I just need a new guitar. Convince yourself. I would get a setup first. Get a setup, change your strings. It's like £80, but it's less than you spend on a new guitar, and you'll end up probably realizing the guitar you have is really nice. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy a new guitar. I'm always game. I would 100% run a support group. If there was ever like a anonymous group that I'd run, it would be support for people who want to buy new guitars. So in that support group, we'd sit around in a circle and say, hi, I'm Darryl and I keep buying new guitars. So if you want support buying guitars, 100% all the time, I think if you want a new guitar, there's nothing stopping you. But take care of those other guitars, because sometimes what can happen is you buy a new guitar and you fall out of love with it, and really you love that guitar, so you just haven't taken care of it. So get set up, change the strings, they always sound better, and it has a big effect on tone. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual guitar and then what you can do on that. So I'm on a Strat today, so this is going to be a bit Strat biased, but I'm going to try and talk about principles that you can kind of use across any guitar you've got in front of you, as long as it's electric. So obviously we normally have a pickup selector where we've got pickups that we're choosing here. I have a volume knob here. Sometimes you'll have 2 volume knobs, but on this I've got 1. And then you've got a tone knob, and I have 2 tone knobs here on my guitar. For your actual guitar, it's worth taking a look at what the electrics actually do, because a lot of the time they're not labelled, and you'll just see that some say volume, some say tone. Every guitar you can just Google online and you'll be able to see what does what. Once you get a feel for it, you can probably pick up most guitars and just work it out pretty quickly anyway. But sometimes there's these odd switches and buttons and you have no idea what they're going to be doing on the guitar. Sometimes I see guitars with buttons and switches and stuff, and I don't really know what I'm looking for. And all my goal is, if I pick up a guitar like that, it's just trying to get a tone that I can stand as quickly as possible by feeling my way through it. But here's the things I'm looking for first of all. If I've got a volume and tone knob, volume I'm going to put normally at about 8 out of 10. So on here I actually have 0 to 10. If you don't have any 0 to 10 on there, like a lot of guitars don't, you're just going to have to feel it. So you put it all the way on 10, and I'm going to roll it back slightly. Why do I do that? It's so that if I want to take a solo and I want to add a bit more to it from my chord playing, I've got a little bit of roll to come there without needing any pedals or without going to the amp and having to do anything with it. So I always tend to work on about 8 out of 10 when I'm doing stuff on the guitar. So I roll it back to about there. Okay? So the way I think about tone knobs is, although they tend to use the same kind of numbering on these as you do with the volume knob, with tone, I tend to think of 5 like it's actually 0. So I know it says 1 to 10 on there, but I tend to think of 5 as 0. So that's the middle point, and then anything below that I think of as subtracting, and anything above that I think of as adding. So when I find the tone knobs on the guitar or on the amplifier, the first thing I want to do is put them in the middle so that I'm not all the way open or all the way closed. And that's completely the opposite of what you see in the movies. The movies, you see people go to their amp and they turn everything up to 10 all the way. And I just imagine it sounds horrible. I would never do that because it will make your ears bleed. I'm sure you probably haven't, but it looks cool in the movies. But in reality, when you're working with most things, you want to put them in the middle for tone. And that's the same on your amp. So if it goes 0 to 10 in your amp, some amps do actually have a 0 and then they have a minus and a plus. I would set them to 5. So if you've got mid, high and bass, set them all to 5. If it just says tone, set it in the middle and then move from there. Same one here, so I have those kind of on 5, and then based on the amp I'm playing through or whatever I'm working on, I will adjust from there. So if I have this all the way up, it sounds different. I think, I don't know if it's coming across in the recording so well, but to me in the room, that sounds high and it's almost like scratching my ear a little bit. So just rolling that back off to 5 makes it a lot more bearable. And then if I do the same on whatever pickup I'm on, this kind of deals with that as well. So if I go to the other pickup where it would be more scratchy, that sounds okay. But if I did everything open again, to me it sounds a bit scratchy again as I play. So you roll it back and then adjust from there. So I'm not going to go too into depth with how I'm getting my sound today because it doesn't really matter. The important part is I would always work from there as a 5. So whatever guitar you're on, sometimes these tone knobs are not very responsive, but I would still set them down here and then just move from there and adjust for your sound. And that's kind of your first responsibility when you sit down with the guitar, is to try and get a decent tone out of it once it's plugged in. Spend a few minutes, and once you know how to get a good tone, it's a little bit like your first time tuning up. Whenever people first learn to tune a guitar, it takes them like 20 minutes to get that guitar in tune, and you get quicker and you get quicker, and in the end it takes people like 10 seconds to tune a guitar. Tone is very, very similar. it might take you 20 minutes to like of messing around with tone, or it's on your brain a lot, and then eventually that comes down 15, 10, 5, under a minute. You'll just sit there and you go, okay, cool, good enough. I can go for it. So I think that's really helpful. So on the guitar, we've got volume, tone. On the amp, I want you to think about volume and tone as well. So you tend to have, you've got your volume and you have gain on there as well, and they're slightly different. But the most important things for getting a tone to begin with are shifting those tone knobs out. So if I see your amplifier at home basics and you've got the tone knobs on 10, move them back to 5. And then adjust from there for what you're hearing. Have a little play with it. And that should make things sound significantly nicer on your guitar. So that's my tone basics advice. We only did a couple things today, but it's really simple to get yourself a nice sounding tone on most guitars just by knowing a little bit about your guitar and the sound of what's going on. Now, the last thing I have to say is about the pickup selector. So on this one, I've got 5 possible positions of pickup. There's 3 actual pickups, and my selector does this one on its own, these 2 together, this one on its own, these 2 together, or this one. And that would be the same on any Strat style guitar. On a Les Paul, it's a little bit different. You have 2 pickups on there. All you need to do is look up what they do on your instrument. But importantly, when it comes to the sound, what you need to know is things which are further this way are going to sound warmer. And so this pickup, the extreme is on this side. And this one, anything going this way is going to sound tinnier, which is fine, and sometimes there's a call for both. So sometimes a solution that you can use, or a way of thinking about this in terms of pickup selecting, is if you're playing lower on the fretboard with the low chords, we don't want to make those less muddy as we're playing. So a way that you can deal with that is to have a tinnier sound on lower chords. On those lower sounding notes. And then as we go up on the fretboard, you want to bring out, and you don't want it to sound tinny because now we're playing higher notes. We're in danger of it sounding ear-piercing. You can switch to lower sounding pickups in the range. And it brings out the middle of that sound a little bit more, and it sounds nice. So that's one way you can think about how you select the pickups. But most things is knowing what pickup you're actually on and listening to the sound of how the same thing can have a different timbre when you just change the pickup slightly. So that's the sound that you're either going to add to and make kind of more interesting with effects and cooler, or you're just going to add to it and it will sound rubbish. It will kind of bring out the original tone that you have. So before you go out and buy new effects pedals, amps, and all that stuff, try and get a sound out of the guitar and the amp that you've got that you actually like the sound of. That should make a big difference in order to get the effects and anything you want to add on top afterwards sounding good. Thanks so much for watching the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers at the moment, so I'd really appreciate you hitting subscribe. I do videos every Thursday and Saturday, and I will see you again soon. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.